to Zero Zeta Gaming. We're going to do Guess the Elo again. So let's get started. Okay, we got D4, F5, and we're on the side of black here. Okay. D4, F5. So we got a Dutch C4, knight F6, knight C3, G6, H4. Wow. Okay. Assaulting the king. Bishop G7. H4, 5. Now we take the pawn and E4. Okay, so white has built up a pretty solid center, and black is really struggling with development, so I would definitely say white is better here. Oh, and this is a 3-minute game, it looks like. Fantastic for 3 minutes. Um, okay, so I think what white should do, needs to finish developing, but also not try and not open up their king. So I would play maybe e6 here, and then try and open up the bishop with b6. Oh, no, you can't do that because now they just take the pawn and open up where your king is supposed to be, and then you're never castling kingside. Okay, so they don't take the pawn. They instead bring the bishop out. Okay, now you take the pawn. And, oh, okay, okay. That's not the worst. And now you play e6. Okay, so why is that a mistake here? That's a mistake. Actually, why is that a mistake? Oh, wow. Okay, so the computer is just suggesting rook takes h7 because if you take back, then there's bishop takes pawn, forking the king and the rook. All right. Well, I'm not surprised that wasn't spotted in a 3-minute game. Um, all right. So knight f3, d5, bishop g5, queen d6, bishop d3. Uh, right. Okay. So now apparently you can just take the pawn and be okay. And if bishop takes, then I guess the knight comes out? Is that the idea? Oh, then there's queen check, winning the bishop. You have to go like knight here. Go ahead. So there's queen check, knight here, and then knight comes out targeting this pawn. Um, and I guess you eventually lose this pawn. There's rook here. Oh, and that pawn. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. And 3-minute game. I'm not surprised that none of these tactics were seen. Oh, they did actually take, um, but they didn't give check. All right, they didn't give check. Uh, Instead they castled, which is, uh, I mean, castling into the line of the bishop, maybe not great. So if you were going to castle, you probably should have done it before taking the pawn. But all right. Bishop takes, and then castles. Uh, oh, by the way, I am making all of these games a study on Lichess. Um, so you will be able to access that. It is public. So if you're watching this later, let's see. I will go ahead and put it in the chat. Oh, okay. We'll put it in the chat here then. Okay. So now you should be able to access the Lichess study that I've created for this series. Okay, so queen b3, putting pressure on this pawn here. Uh, it does, putting pressure on this pawn here. Uh, it does sort of tie down the bishop and queen, but uh, there is no way to add pressure to the pawn. Uh, you can do pawn up, but then I just move the pawn up and you block this diagonal. So what I would do here is probably bring the knight out, threaten a knight a5. Uh, um, you can't take the pawn here because then you get pinned and then you lose the bishop. So yeah, top Indian move is knight c6, and that is what is played. Oh wow, very nice. And then queen's castle, protecting the pawn, and then knight a5, queen d3, and black is just much better here. And wow, okay, black can actually sack the rook here apparently. Um, And if they take with the queen, then they lose the bishop. If they take with the pawn, okay, and now here, and they still lose the bishop. Incredible. Okay, wow. So winning here is rook takes f3. Uh, all right, but you take the bishop. That's completely reasonable. Um, and then queen takes. And now you're going to trade queens for some reason. Um, Wait, but you're not even down on time. You want to keep the queens on the board if you're up on time because it's it's easier to spend less time when you have fewer pieces to work with. But when you have more, uh, you have to think a lot more, so it takes more time. So I don't like this move. I don't like queen g5. Oh, and white spent 16 minutes, 16 seconds on this move when they're already down on the clock. They should have taken the queen without hesitation. Uh, but I guess I guess white is down a pawn, so that makes sense. And b3 is the top engine. And then we trade queens, and then the bishop comes out. Okay, rook puts pressure on the e6 pawn, and the black's rook comes to f5. Now this does two things. It prepares to double the rook, and it puts pressure on this bishop here, and maybe the rook can even come over here, and you get an attack along the a file. So the bishop moves out of the way, and the second rook comes over, and the bishop comes here, targeting this pawn. So a very natural move here, I think, would be, I don't like c6 because it blocks in the bishop. What might be better is bishop a4 targeting the rook. And when the rook moves, then what? Oh, the rook can't move there because of the bishop here. So the rook would have to move here, and then what? Um, wow. Okay, so the computer doesn't actually like bishop a4. It doesn't hate it. But yeah, rook d3 is the top engine response to that. And then you have to play, and then you have to move the pawn, basically. Yeah, okay. So bishop to a4 is probably what I would have played, but it's not actually that good. Oh no, you don't want to play c6. If you're going to move the pawn, you should probably move it to c5. It's guarded by the rook, and if they take, like, you don't even have to take with the rook. You can just bring the other rook over and like bulldoze down the c file. But this is a really passive move. I don't like this move. Okay, so now we have knight coming into e5, and okay, the bishop moves back, but really this bishop now sucks. It's like the worst bishop. It's completely boxed in. So white doesn't really want to trade this knight for the bishop, so probably the best move is just bringing the rook to the d file to guard the bishop. It does break the battery here, but it does prepare for a beneficial trade, and it puts pressure on the d file and the d pawn, and that is the best move, or one of the best moves. Engine also likes e bishop e8, which I don't really understand. So the bishop comes back to c8, and the rook comes out where it can be pinned by the bishop. Oh boy. And it does. Now, the best move for white would be to block. Um, because then you just lose a pawn as opposed to losing the exchange. Uh, because the bishop takes, the rook takes, and then you probably start putting pressure on this. And they do play pawn to f4, the best move, and bishop takes. Wow, the engine is actually saying rook takes is okay because after bishop takes, you uh, pin the rook again and you win back the exchange. So all that does is force the exchange of rooks, which is good because you're going to be 2 pawns up. That makes perfect sense. Okay, so but bishop takes, and rook takes. And now we have king to d2, and then rook to f2, trying to trade when you're up material. And then king to c3. I don't understand that move because you can just take the rook and then bring the other rook. I suppose you can block with the rook here as opposed to losing this pawn, but then you don't have any rooks, and it's bishop versus knight. I guess the knight is a lot better, but you're still down 2 pawns. So I'm not sure. I think it's winning for black, but we'll see. And um, they do trade the rooks. Okay, and then the other rook comes in, rook blocks, and trade rook. Yes. Okay. Now the king comes out to play because it's the end game now. So king g7 and king e3, king f6. Now I'm immediately, as an intermediate player, I'm immediately looking at this, and um, but the knight is fine where it is. So this check actually seems fairly unnecessary because the king can just move or even move up again. It just gives the king a tempo. It's not that good of a check. So probably what the best move for white here is just e or c5, I would think, just to keep this bishop locked in. If you play c5, the c pawn can't move, and if you try and get out with like b6 or b5, you can take the pawn, and the bishop does come out, but it's harder. Oh, but also this pawn hangs. Yeah, so playing c5 here, if you play like b5 or b6, you can trade pawns and then take this one. So it does actually prevent the bishop getting out entirely. But they didn't play it. Okay. So king f4, h5, g. What? Why are you trading pawns when you're down 2 pawns? That doesn't make sense. Now the best move for black is to just give check, and then probably push the h pawn. That way you have a passer. And very nice. Yeah. So check, king g3, check, king f3, king e7. Okay, so this pawn is going to become a target. And this bishop can barely move. Uh, so I'm thinking probably the best move for white here is still c5. And black, the engine is actually saying c5 is good for black because it sacks a pawn, but like these doubled pawns aren't going to survive very long. and the bishop gets out. Okay, yeah. Top engine move is still c5 for white, and then king d3. Sorry, king e3 is what they played. Bishop d7. And white doesn't want to trade because this is an absolutely terrible bishop. So even though, generally speaking, bishops are slightly better than knights, this bishop is not worth that knight. This knight is such a good knight. And now they play c5. And bishop comes to e8, trying to get out this way, maybe coming to f6. Uh, Although if you go to f6, there may be some, well, no, because the bishop guards that square. So yeah, bishop. So I'm thinking king f6, bishop g6, and the bishop comes to like b1 or b2 and finally gets out of the pawn chain. Okay, so I don't like this move because it just helps black with their plan. Knight f3, targeting the pawn, but black wanted to play f king f6 anyway, and that's what happened. Um, and black wins on time. Yeah, because white just spent a bunch of time. Let's see, where did white spend the most time? 25 seconds on bg5, 20 seconds on queen's castle, 16 on that. Black is doing an amazing job with time management, by the way. Um, this could easily be like, I want to say 17, uh, around my rating, to be honest. I didn't like some of the moves, but no immediate blunders. The plan made sense. So I'm gonna guess 17 to 1800. All right, let's take a look. 2150. I suppose it was a 3-minute game, so these are okay. I should have taken that into account. 2150. And this game is between whom? Go back here. Good look. Okay, here we go. And it's that game. Okay, not my best guess ever. So this is another 3-minute game, and it's an Italian. Let's dive into it. Go back to the. Oh, engine has been open the entire time. Oh well. Okay. Um, so we have e4, e5, where it's white's perspective. E4, e5, and f3, and c6. And this is Italian, so bishop c4. Oh dear. This is not a good move because it brings out the queen too early. Uh, Now black or white can just uh, attack it by playing like d3, not d4, but maybe like c3, d4, bringing the bishop in. There's actually a line in the Roy Lopez where since the bishop is here, you you play c3, they play bishop c5, then you play d4 even though it's defended 4 times and only attacked 3. Um, but you play d4 and when they take, you have c5. It also requires the knight to be there though, because then the bishop takes knight, the queen has moved, and now you can take back this pawn with the knight. But this is slightly different because the bishop is here, so we'll see what happens. Okay, castles, I like that. G5. Okay, okay. So here, in order to punish this play, this weird play, I might, I might even play d4 immediately. Oh, there's knight take, and then you can't take the pawn because knight takes knight is check, and then you lose the bishop. So maybe d4 is not the best, but we could probably play like d3. Oh, but computer says d4 is the best move. D4 is the best move. And what happens when knight takes pawn? You take the knight, and then pawn takes. Oh, wow. Okay. So this is a bit deeper than I was looking. But you play e5 because they can't take the pawn because then you lose the queen to a pin. And I guess white is just much better here, even being down a pawn. And queen has to come back. Ah, and the queen comes and takes that pawn. And you can play d5 here because you're not going to take en passant. You got you lose the queen if you do that. Okay, did that happen? No. Okay, they played d3, which is probably what I would have played because d4 looks scary after knight takes. Um, all right, so d3 and now g4. Now the uh-oh. Yeah, okay. So this is a blunder because the queen is just gonna move like to g4, g6 or g7, and then you have to move the knight, and then you lose the bishop. They're trying to do danger levels here, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And then queen g6, and then oh, bishop takes f7. Wow. Yeah, here in this position, you just have to go with what you have and play knight takes e5, and then just sort of admit that you messed up. Um, Here, I'm okay, but you're killing off the your best bishop. It's outside of the pawn train chain. putting pressure on a key diagonal, and you just play bishop takes f7. And now, yeah, now king takes, and you're still losing one of these pieces. All right, pawn take. You have to play queen. All right, now you're down two pieces out the opening. This is a fantastic start. Okay, knight c3 after king e8. Knight d4. No! Don't trade off the queens when you're down material. Hi! You've got to guess the elo? Oh, you've got to guess the elo game. Send it to me. Send it to me. We'll run through it. Is it on Lichess, on chess.com? What? Hello? You still there? Okay. I guess we'll just continue with this game. Uh, don't trade the queens here. Because you're down two pieces. If you trade the queens, they're just gonna play bishop here, protecting the pawn. It's not good. Okay, and they just hang a knight. Fantastic. Yeah, you have to trade queens here. So bishop takes, yeah. So they just blunder a knight, and then they trade queens. They said they saw ooh fork, but didn't realize the square was guarded. All right, so now they play d6, and now knight back to c3. Nice. Now the bishop's just got to slide back. Or you could move your king for no reason. And c4. Really, what white should be doing here is creating counterplay on the f file, trying to trade this pawn, because black doesn't have a lot of development, so white needs to develop the rook, and the other rook. So white just needs to play f4 here, attacking the pawn chain. But white doesn't see that, so white plays c4, black plays c6, knight takes bishop. Wow, not even knight takes. You really hate developing your pieces, don't you? Okay. Um, no, you play king takes. Okay. And now you play b4. Okay. You're trying to, but like, there's, you gotta open up this side of the board because it's already open. This side is completely closed. What are you trying to do? I mean, at least play c5 to destabilize the center. Okay, but b4, knight f6, c5. Okay, now you play c5. Oh, and you just hang a pawn and a pin. And you don't even take this. I guess you saw that pawn takes, knight takes, but you forgot about the pin there. And knight takes, now bishop takes, now rook over. Ooh, okay, I like this idea, rook e1, but probably would have been better is rook fe1 rather than rook ae1, unless you are planning on going f4 at some point soon. King gets out of the way. A3, B5. Very good. Okay, so they did not take en passant, and that is actually bad in this case because it opens up the rook. So that gives me a little bit of information. Um, and then okay, I probably would have just played bishop g6, um, because it's right there. But I guess you were afraid of bishop coming to g3 at some point, maybe. It's not the worst move. Uh, wow. Okay, I hate this move. You have this bishop on a nice long open diagonal, and then you just put him in the front of a brick wall. What's the bishop doing there? It's not doing anything. That's what. It's not doing anything. Okay, rook up. Knight attacks the rook, and the rook attacks the knight, and the knight goes into the corner where it can't do anything. And now white is just better. Wow. Okay, rook over, and you trade rooks because it's there. Now you have some back rank problems. Okay, very good. H3. Don't get back rank. Don't get back rank mated. Now rook e1, king h2, h5. What does that do? What does that actually do? It doesn't do anything. Okay, you probably should have just pushed f4 all the way, because it's a passed pawn, and you're gonna put the rook behind the pawn, and uh, hopefully get it to promote. They can they can play rook f1, which is probably the best move here, and then rook f2, blocking it, and then you kind of have to trade rook, and then I don't know, probably the king comes out. The bishop should come this way, the king will go this way, and the bishop will target that diagonal. I don't know why they played bishop b7. Okay, but they played f3, and now they just hang a rook. They hang a rook in one move. Wow. And wow, look at this. Bishop b7, Bishop c8, bishop b7. So white is effectively just getting a bunch of free moves here, and then they hang their knight. So I think at this point, black is pretty much resigning. And yeah, okay, now they resign. I'm not sure what happened at the end there. They played a relatively normal game, and then black just hung all the pieces. I, I'm gonna guess like, this was not a good move. That's not a good move. Okay, they didn't see that the knight was guarding the square. They just saw the fork. So I'm thinking like 11, 1200 on Lichess. 11, 1200. That's what I'm going to say. Okay. So which option is closest? We'll go that one. Nope. Okay, 994. Not bad. 994. And what game is it? It is this one. Okay. On to the next game. We got King's Indian. Um, so C4, G6, F3, Bishop G7, Bishop G3, D6. Okay. Bishop G2, Knight F6, castles, castles. Pretty normal game so far. C4, C5, Knight C3. All right, keeping the tension here. Keeping the tension. Now, Knight C6, Pawn B3, Knight G. Why do I keep saying the wrong piece? Bishop G4, Pawn takes C5, Pawn takes C5. We don't get a queen. Wow, this is a completely symmetric position now. Completely, okay, not completely symmetric. In order for it to be completely symmetric, black would have to play b6, which means that's not a good move because symmetry would uh, mean it's favorable for white. So probably best, you don't want to trade queens here because then you just give them in the open file. Probably best here. Um, Oh, it's tough to say. I would want to actually move this knight maybe to d7, get hitting the knight and um opening up this square for the other knight. Okay. So in this position, actually, the computer wants h6. So why doesn't this work? Yeah, you go rook here, and then you can start putting pressure. Oh, I guess opening up this diagonal here isn't great for black. I don't know. Uh, it's not a terrible move. Just not one of the top engine moves. Okay. So, okay, you play queen a5 immediately, and now rook c1 makes sense guarding the knight. Now the rook comes out, rook f e8, and the queen goes to c2, even though there's this. And if takes, then you you take with the pawn actually to target the knight and not allow this capture. I think is how that goes. Okay, but the computer actually wanted this, which makes sense. You don't really want a pawn on d4, and now you take, and I think you take. You're supposed to take with the pawn. Yeah. Okay. Look at this. The computer says that this is okay for black, but you have to take with the pawn because otherwise you lose that one. If you take with the rook, then they take, and maybe you put your rook here and you play down a pawn. It's not great. So you have to take with the pawn, and they do. Very good. Oh wow, they're getting fancy. See, if if takes here and takes, then the bishop comes back and takes the pawn, and it is adequately defended. All right, so bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, and knight to g5. Very good. Now bishop to f5, and now, oh, you can take the bishop here and just get rid of this really nice bishop, and then hit the pawn. You can't take the pawn immediately because your queen is under attack, but yeah. Um, so they move the queen here. Wow, rook takes. Wait, why is that the best move? Why is that the best move? Okay, let's take a closer look at this rook sacrifice. Rook takes knight, and now the queen attacks, or the pawn attacks the queen. Wait, what's wrong with bishop takes here? Here? Now you can even take the bishop and then take. Um, But I guess the best move here, and then you can, wow, that is crazy. Okay. Did black see this when they sacked the rook? And like, if you don't take the rook immediately, you just hit the queen first. Then they can do this. You move the queen up, and they hit this. And wow, and you can take here, take here, take, take, and it's equal because, but you're down a queen for a rook, bishop, and pawn. That's an incredible find. Okay, yeah, so bishop takes, and now pawn push. Nice. Now bishop, queen, bishop take, rook take. Uh-oh. Oh, wait. Why does this work? The rook can go here, but if the bishop comes here, then you just take the pawn. So why does this work? The rook comes here. Oh, and if you take the pawn, then you lose the bishop. And if you don't take the pawn and do something like this instead, then you still lose the bishop. So that's why it works. But they take the e pawn. Oh, wait a minute. They take the e pawn. All right, and now it's winning for white because it's. I mean, you're going to come and probably take this pawn. I don't understand why it's plus 3.5 though. That's kind of crazy. Oh, and wow. Okay, so the engine here is suggesting A6. The pawn is pinned to the rook. That's why it's plus 3. There's a tactic. But it's a 5-minute game. You don't necessarily see that, but you both have 3 minutes left on the clock, so maybe you should have. Um, so instead they go F3, E6. Now you take the pawn. Uh-oh. Be careful here. Be careful. Okay. I understand why you made that move. Uh, it gets out of this. So, but they can still play this. Uh, and if you take the pawn, they take your rook. And that's what happens. Okay. Uh-oh. Yeah, no. Uh, white had to play rook e1, rook d1, king f2. And then after an exchange of rooks, the bishop comes here, and maybe you move your bishop to a6, and yeah, it's pretty equal at that point. But you play king f2, which allows it. All right, so king f2, rook d1, and black wins by resignation. Okay, this was a pretty solid game until the end. But this is a 5-minute game, and they both had 3 minutes left on the clock at the end after 23 moves. So that tells me they're not actually using their time wisely. So, but this was, and finding rook takes, what, here? That was incredible. And no obvious blunders. Um, yeah, you had to play rook e1 here, or I guess the engine move was a6. Um, but that's a hard move to see actually. Um, and then you definitely had to play rook e1 here. They were worried about rook d1, but since you played f3, it can just be guarded by the king. Um, gosh, I could easily see this being like a 17, 1800, maybe 1900 on Lichess. Spotting this sequence is pretty impressive too. Although not going for d2 and then going here. It took you 4 seconds to play that move. Mm, yeah, these are all mistakes I could conceivably make. So I'm gonna say 17, 1800. 23, 28. You're 23, 28. And playing king f2. Okay then. That gives me hope. Twenty-three, 28. That is crazy. Um, and using time like that, that's where they both used the bullet or something. I'm not sure what that was about. Okay. Okay. Now we go on to the fourth game. Okay, we got a French defense exchange variation. And we're playing with the black pieces this time. Alright, e4, e6, d4, d5, e takes d5, e takes d5, bishop d3, knight c6. Oh, knight c6. No, come on. You have to push the pawn. You don't want the pawn trapped behind your knight. Okay, so immediately this is giving me like 1400 vibes at most. Uh, okay, c3, bishop d6, knight f3, knight e7. Okay, I would probably have just put the knight here. Uh, I'm not really sure what this does, but the engine likes it better than knight f6, but only marginally. Bishop e3, a6. What is a6? Come on. Okay. What is a6? A6 does nothing. Are you worried about bishop to b5 pinning the knight? Then you just castle. What does a6 do? All right. A4. Nope, not a3. A4. That similarly does absolutely nothing. I mean, it prevents b5, but they're not going to play that anyway. I guess these players were just like, oh, if they play a6, then I play a4, and they can't play b5, even though b5 doesn't work in this situation anyway. It just seemed like something that's kind of something you're supposed to do, right? Okay, so a4, c, bishop g4, knight d2, castle. Oh, that's why it's a mistake. There's a Greek gift here. Bishop takes, um, and if king takes, knight goes here, king comes back, queen takes bishop. Fascinating. Yeah, so you gotta be careful about this pattern where the knight is on f3, the black king is castled, the bishop is on d3, the queen is, or I guess on the HB diagonal, and the queen is on d1. That's a pattern you have to watch out for. And they didn't see this. idea, so they also castled. Why? There's no reason to trade the bishop here. They're just gonna take with the knight and put the knight. You're effectively trading uh this g4 bishop with the d2 knight. That d2 knight is doing absolutely nothing. It is trapped in the corner, and you're just trading this bishop for it, and that's an awful move. So now I'm definitely getting like 11, 1200 vibes for Lichess, and they take with the knight, of course. Now the knight comes out to g6, the queen goes to b3, hitting the pawn. Although you can't actually take this pawn because of bishop takes h2, queen takes d5. Okay, but now you can take that pawn. What is queen c8? What does that even do? Why would you play queen c8? That doesn't make any sense. Probably what black wants to do in this situation is um, either bring the knight to a5, hoping to get into c4 because they can't take the pawn for previously mentioned reasons, or mm, or maybe bringing the queen to d7 just to connect the rook and make the queen a little bit more active. Queen c8 doesn't make any sense. And now they just take the pawn and knight e knight ce7. Wow. Okay. The queen just goes back. King h8. Really? Are you kidding me? This seems like a move that some like 11, 1200 would make. Like, oh, I've seen videos on this. King h8 must be good, right? They say king h8 is always a good move, but it does absolutely nothing in this situation. Usually, you play king h8 to get your king off of this diagonal, so that you can play something like f5, f4, but you're never going to play f5, f4 in this situation. It's too dangerous. The knight's going to come in, and you're going to get forked, and you're going to have to sack the rook, and this is just not a good move. What black needs to do here is take control of the center, maybe put a knight here eventually, use the c file, maybe try and open up the a file, maybe play h6 to prevent the bishop from coming in. King h8 does nothing. Okay, targeting the pawn. Bishop e4. Yeah, so like I said, the best move for white here is to just bring the knight in and attack the pawn. And you can't even push the pawn because you still get checked. And then you have to sack the rook because otherwise you're walking into check and you lose the queen. But bishop e4 makes sense. What? Okay, okay. You're not even low. You spent 30 seconds. You spent 45, 50 seconds on king h8, king g8. What? You just gave white two free moves. What is this? Why are you doing this? That doesn't make any sense. Okay. And now queen takes b7, queen takes b7, bishop takes b7. Now, I suppose, yeah, you had to go to a7. Rook a7 to guard the pawn. Now the bishop's just going to take the pawn, and you're completely losing. Ah, but you saw that you could take this pawn. Hmm. Okay, now move the rook over, target this pawn. They're probably going to put the bishop here, and then you just bring your knight in. Oh, that's a mistake. Interesting. Wait, why is this a mistake? They put the rook back here. Okay, you can bring the rook over here, bring the other rook. I guess so. You basically have to trade. Okay, but like rook a1, that's you just played rook b1 and put your rook on a nice open file. I don't think they're going to play rook a1. They did. Wow, look at that. Okay, so now black starts to repeat the position. That's good because black is just much worse. And so they bring the other rook in. And now what? Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. The uh, rook c2 makes sense. They can just bring the rook back. Um, yeah, rook c1, trying to trade the rooks. Rook b2. Black is just like, no, I don't want to trade. White is just like, yeah, I want to trade. I want to trade. Do you want to trade? Do you want to trade? Black's like, no, no, I don't want to trade. Do you want to draw? Do you want to draw? Rook b1. Oh my God. Is this gonna be a draw? Rook a2, rook a1. Why would white make a draw in this situation? Rook b1, rook cb1, rook c2, rook c1 is a draw. Draw by repetition. Oh my God. You're up two pawns and you draw by repetition. Okay. Okay. So let me see. Knight knight c6 was bad. Um, bishop takes f3 was bad, really bad. Um, and queen c8 is nonsense. And then king h8 g g8. That doesn't make any sense. Um, and then rook b8. Okay, so I'm thinking like 900. It's 3 plus 2. They both have over 2 minutes left on the clock. Yeah. And then white just blundering into a draw by repetition. So I'm thinking like 900 to 1,000. That's what I'm gonna go with. 1248. Oh my God. That is embarrassing. 1248. And you play King H8, King G8. Oh, oopsies. Okay, anyway. Wow. Just wow. And like blundering a draw by repetition when you're up two pawns, that is obscene. Okay, so we got this. I guess 900 to 1,000, and it was actually 1248. And I accidentally put this game on the wrong tab. So let me just go through it quickly again. Um, Bishop T6, Knight 3, Bishop E3. Okay. All right, now we go on to our fifth and final game of the episode. Haven't gotten a single one right so far. Maybe uh this one will be different. All right. So we got a bird opening and D5, knight C6. This is like a reverse Dutch. Yeah, Dutch variation. Okay. So G3, bishop G4, knight F6, D3, E6, castles, bishop C5, king H1, Castles. Okay, black shouldn't castle kingside here. Black wants to go for a kingside attack. H5, H4. But okay, castles. And then pawn to E3, D4. What does that do? That move does nothing. White should play in the center here. Play play E4. Don't let the bishop through. Just say play E4, saying to black, "Oh, you blocked in your own bishop, haha." That's why D4 is a mistake because of E5, E4. But Queen E2 does nothing. Black is just going to take the pawn, and you're gonna. Okay, I guess it protects the pawn, but you could have just played E4 to protect the pawn. Whatever. Um, Bishop to take E3, Queen takes. Rook to E8. I don't hate it. Get the rook on the same file as the queen. Now we get knight C3, queen D6, knight E4, knight takes, pawn takes? Yeah, pawn takes. Now queen to B4, B3. What? Bruh, you, you really just playing queen B4, queen A3. What are you playing checkers or something? Are you playing checkers? What's going on? Um, okay, so queen A3, C3. Why are you okay? I guess that's the engine's top move, but I would never play that. Uh, I don't know. Maybe what are they afraid of? The knight coming in here? I don't know. Bishop takes E5. Okay, yeah, you just play F5. 8. What is H6? Again, that doesn't do anything. And this is a 10 plus 5. This is 10 plus 5. Oh my god. They both have 8 minutes left on the clock after move 18. Well, 8.5, 9 minutes. They're playing bullet. Okay. Uh, G4 or blitz, I guess, because it's plus 5. Uh, Rook D8, Rook A D8, G5. Yeah, white is better here because they've got an attack going and black pieces are very uncoordinated. Like the knight can't come in here. The knight can't move practically anywhere, and G5 is just really strong. So H takes G5, Queen takes pawn. Okay, that move makes sense to me. You're preparing for Rook G1, and Black has to defend this pawn probably with Queen F8 or even Queen E7 trying to trade queens. Hello, I'm doing okay. How are you? Yeah, and the engine's top choice is Queen E7 here. And what is Rook D6? Okay, not only does that not do anything about the Rook G1, um, like it blocks your queen from being able to protect it too. So now Rook G1. Oh, that's your plan. Except now they're just going to push the pawn and then come in this way. Oh, pushing the pawn is bad here. I definitely would have done that. Okay, so apparently what you had to do is play queen here first. They they can't take the pawn because the rook, and then I guess you just dogpile on this pawn here. You bring the bishop over, you bring the queen here, and you've got like four attackers to two defenders, and then you have +2, right? So that's why queen h6 and bishop h5 is so good, according to the engine. But they played the move I probably would have played, which is apparently a blunder. And now rook e6 is the engine move, but they don't play it. Wow, okay. They instead play queen b2. Okay, now white can this queen b2 doesn't do anything about white's attack. It just doesn't. So it makes very little sense. White is putting on a pretty strong attack against black's king side. What white needs to do is defend it with rook e6, trying to win the pawn that's uh, crushing black's king, and maybe, you know what, maybe even rook d e6 to bring the queen back. But queen b2 does nothing. Like, it's not acknowledging the attack at all. Um, and now we get a series of moves that doesn't, uh, like, what do you, what is this? What is rook ad1? It, if you're going to, you're trying to remove the defender in the position, but you don't realize that when they take, one of your attackers is going to be uh, not attacking anymore either. So they can just trade, I would think. Oh wow. Okay. The engine is not even saying to trade, it's to go attack the bishop, and that's just like queen f2 prevents the trade because then you lose the bishop with check, and then you just take the rook back. Or you can take the pawn and threaten the bishop that way. Okay, but they don't play that. Now they play rook d e6, but now it doesn't work because the queen is no longer on this diagonal. So probably what the best move for white is here is to just bring the rook in and onto the seventh file, and maybe even sack the rook on f7. Okay, what is what does the engine think of this idea? Oh, it hates it. It hates this idea. And if you go here and bring the bishop over here, then you lose this pawn. Wow. This is why I'm not a master, because I don't see the things like this. I would just play rook d7 and hoping to sack the rook here and get an attack on the g file. But apparently there's a defense against that, which so you have to play bishop h5 first. But they play bishop g4. That's not a terrible move. I think it's the engine's second favorite move. And then they put the rook back on d6. Okay, there's really nowhere else for it to go, so that makes sense. And now they trade. Wow, wow. Look at. Okay, so here Lichess actually finds mate in 10. But apparently, if you take the rook, it's mate in 3. If you take the rook back, it's mate in 3. Because the rook is no longer keeping tabs on this pawn, so they can just play queen h6, and that's what happens. Uh, okay, and now black knows they're getting mated, so they just, yeah, GG. Okay, that was interesting. I would say this maneuver by black with the queen was pretty terrible. Like queen to b4, then a3, then b2, and like they basically played the game without a queen. So assuming they're the same rating, uh, black, black probably just or white probably just played. Yeah, white played pretty well actually. Had a nice attack going, and then black just did not acknowledge the attack. I don't think anyone over 1500 plays this queen maneuver. That was just silly. And but early game, and this was not good because of e4. Hmm. Yeah, so I'm getting like 12, 1300 vibes. 12, 1300. Um, because white was able to create a nice attack. Um, and there were some missed tactics, and it's a rapid. So actually, it's a rapid. So maybe it's more like 11, 1200. It's 10 plus 5. And you both have 8 minutes left on the clock after 25 moves. Why are you playing rapid? You should be playing blitz. Um, I don't know. It could be anywhere between 1100 and 1300. Um, let's say, hmm, we're gonna say 1150 to 1250. That's my guess. 1150 to 1250. Okay. Okay, we got one right. 1328. Not too far off. Okay. 1328. I guess 1150 to 1250. And it was 1328. Okay. Very good stuff. Uh, and that's the final game. We only got one right this time. Um, so tune back in next time for more Guess the Elo. Uh, make sure to, if you're on listening on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe for more of these. I also run a math education channel called From Zero to Zeta. It's actually my main YouTube channel. Definitely go check that out, especially if you're interested in math.